Great, it's 5 past, guys, so we'll get underway. Liz, if you can just let any latecomers in, that would be great. And yeah, if you can just keep, if you haven't done so far, just share who you are in the chat, and if you're currently offering any opportunities to young people or hoping to in the near future. My name's Ben. For those of you who haven't met me, I work on the Hidden Talent Programme. I'm not going to give an overview of the programme just yet. I'm going to hand over to the programme manager, Gavin, who was just speaking before, to do that, because you'll all be sick of my voice before the end of the day. So Gavin will do a who's who of Hidden Talent and what we do in a couple of minutes. Thanks for joining us. I hope this is useful today. I should be, really. I think it's quite relevant at the minute with, obviously, youth employment is never far from the headlines at the minute. I'll talk a bit more about purpose and the relevance in a second, but just a quick reminder of the agenda, why we're here, quick overview of the programme. We'll share our perceptions and experiences of working with young people as a good way into the question and answer session with our talent coaches. We should have 4 or 5 coaches on the call. They'll introduce themselves in a little while and explain how they work and support young people. So the talent coaches work on the Hidden Talent Programme. And it's a chance today to sort of tap into some of their expertise. We will have a little 5-minute break at 11. So just to, it's Zoom fatigue and start to set in after an hour or so. So we will have that break. We'll round off any Q&As, and then we're going to use some of the breakout rooms in Zoom. Some of you have probably used these before, where you sort of splinter off into sort of smaller groups. So they're probably sort of groups of sort of 4 or 5, maybe 6, and we will aim to finish on midday, because I'm sure we've all got places to be. So yeah, today's purpose is really to raise awareness of young people's experiences when considering inductions, with a view to focusing on young people who don't have a lot of experience of the workplace. That tends to be the cohort of young people we support. So yeah, young people who may never have worked before maybe come with a few barriers that are not insurmountable, but barriers nonetheless that are not to be unexpected if you've never worked before. So we'll look at unpicking some of those and exploring some of the kind of really simple tips that can overcome those, and you can incorporate those into your own practice. And of course, some of you will be doing some pretty good stuff, I imagine, at the minute already, or will have valuable ideas to contribute. So it'll be a chance for us to listen to some of your ideas, and also to establish links with our talent coaches who work for organisations that support young people into work. If that's something you're looking to, I know we've already seen in the chat that some people are looking at accessing schemes like Kickstart, and that will be through the job centre. But beyond that, you will have opportunities that crop up that you might want to offer to young people, and the organisations our talent coaches work for are well placed to help with employability support. In terms of why we're doing this now, obviously, youth employment is on the rise. It was stood at 500,000 sort of back with the ONS figures that came through from June to August rather, and it's predicted that we could have 1 million young people out of work by November. There is a squeeze on the young people we're talking about today, as more and more young people struggle to find work. If recent graduates, my brother is a recent master's graduate. He's having to work at Tesco's for the minute because he can't find anything connected to his degree. So, there is a displacement effect there when you've got young people who are perhaps overqualified for certain work, pushing the sort of young people we're talking about today even further from the labour market. So we can't ignore those young people. The longer that young people are out of work, there's a scarring effect that lowers earning potential throughout people's lives, the longer they spend out of work as a young person. And again, we think this is pertinent today because there are obviously a lot of incentive schemes in place for employers to take on a young person at the minute, be that the £2,000 grants for employers taking on apprentices under 25, the £1,000 bonus for employers taking on trainees, and obviously the Kickstart scheme, which is the government-funded scheme for people offering work placements for 6 months to young people. And Greater Manchester Centre for Voluntary Organisation, that's GMCVO, who run the Hidden Talent Programme, who I work for. They are acting as a gateway for the Kickstart programme. So a gateway works as a kind of conduit for those employers who can't provide the 25 placements that are needed to apply the 30 placements that are needed to apply directly for funding. So we're partnering with the growth company to offer an access point for those employers who can't stump up 30 placements on their own. We're focusing on VCSE sector, voluntary community sector organisations and employers. So if that's something you want to explore, I think my colleague Helen has shared a link in the chat there. I will introduce my colleagues shortly before the breakout rooms later, because they'll be facilitating those. But I'll do that nearer the time so you can recognise people's voices and faces ahead of the breakout rooms. And yeah, just before I hand over to Gavin to give an overview of the programme, I think it's important to stress that this is a balancing act. We know that young people presenting with a few difficulties, or kind of not even difficulties, just lack of awareness about what's needed when they start a job. It's not all just focus on the young person. As employers' needs aren't your outputs, your targets. You need reliability from a young person. You need high quality work. But equally, young people need time to learn. They need behaviours modelling, and above all, a chance to prove themselves, really. And sort of the pastoral care that can go behind helping model behaviours and give people a chance to prove themselves. They're worthwhile putting in. If it means that someone sticks with something and gets a chance to flourish, then a little bit of effort at the start is surely worth it, and our coaches will talk about that very shortly. I'm going to hand over to Gavin now, just to give a quick overview of the programme before we get some of your thoughts. So Gavin, I should have given you control of the screen now, so you should be able to control the PowerPoint. This is probably where it all comes crashing down. Seems to have worked.
It's worked, but I didn't unmute myself. So that's the, I was thinking before about the differences between physical events and online events. So that's one problem, not unmuting yourself. And then whether the dog will need attention in the next 10 minutes or so. If next door is going to get a delivery, then they're out and then they'll be delivered to us. So it's all different scenarios, isn't it, when you're presenting from home? So as Ben said, I'm going to give an overview of Hidden Talent. So my name's Gavin Owen. Great. There we go. So Hidden Talent is a youth employment program led by GMCVO, and it is across all 10 boroughs of Greater Manchester. It's co-funded by the National Lottery and Greater Manchester Combined Authority. So the 3 boroughs with the highest number of young people who are not in education, employment or training are Salford, Bolton and Manchester, and they're funded by the lottery. And then the other 7 local authorities are funded by the Combined Authority. It's a 2-year investment from April last year until March next year. And it's supporting hidden young people aged 18 to 25. So what do we mean by hidden young people? They are young people who are not in employment, education or training and not claiming any welfare benefits to which they're entitled. So that does include DLA and PIP as well. So any disability related benefits, because that means that they should be known to the job centre, and so they will be able to get support related to the job centre. So this is the eligibility for people to be able to get support from Hidden Talent. 18 to 25, have been out of employment, education or training for more than four months, not been in receipt of welfare benefits for at least the past 4 months, legally entitled to work in the UK, and either a permanent or temporary resident in one of the 10 boroughs of Greater Manchester. So these are some numbers to just give you an idea of the young people that we're currently working with. It's around 270 people that have engaged with the project since April last year. Over 50 have gone on to employment, but as well as that, a lot have gone into training courses, further education, even higher education, apprenticeships. And as you'll see from the last statistic, 7% are homeless on referral. All of those have gone into more stable accommodation, which is, you know, a huge stabilizing of their lives, which is what the talent coaches are able to do as well. As you can see, 87% have never claimed any benefits. So that's for a number of reasons, including the stigma of going into the job centre, not knowing how to do it, not having the right ID. 27% have never had any work experience at all, so either volunteering or work experience through school or since they've been an adult. 57% have not had any GCSE grades A to C. And one of the biggest ones that Janet will probably touch on shortly is the lack of confidence with job searches and CVs, and not knowing what to do and how to apply for a job and what type of role they would want to do as well. So as we cover all 10 boroughs, GMCVO manage the contract with the 2 funders, but we have delivery partners in each of the 10 boroughs. And I'll just bring all those up. So I'll leave this slide up, but now the talent coaches who do that one-to-one work with the young people, they're going to introduce themselves, and then Janet is going to explain a little bit about the role of a talent coach and the work that they do. Okay. Do you want to start by name, alphabetical order? So I'll just go on gallery. In fact, I'll introduce and then we won't get mixed up. So as on my screen, Samantha from Manchester Young Lives, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, so I'm Samantha from Manchester Young Lives, and we're a charity organisation that work across the whole of Manchester. So we are part of the Hidden Talent, working with 18 plus upwards, and then obviously as a charity we work from children from the age of 5 onwards.
Thank you. Dave?
Hiya, I'm Dave. I work for the Broughton Trust. We're based in Broughton. I've just got a lot of feedback there. We cover all Salford. We work with young people. We've worked with young people around Salford now for the last 13 years through youth centres, youth clubs, youth activities, and we've worked on the Talent Match programme and the Hidden Talent programme for the last good few years now.
Thank you. Ian, you're next on my screen.
Hi, I'm Ian from Stockport Homes, social housing provider. We manage, we're an ALMO, so we manage about 12,000 properties all over Stockport. And we've got an employment team of around 6 people, and Talent Match is part of that, and Hidden Talent Match. So we've been involved for about 5 years or so with them.
Okay. And Tina, are you still there?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
I've gone on someone else's network now, so yeah. So I'm Tina Huxley, and I work for a charity called G-Force, which has been established for 21 years. And we are a charity, and we work in the south of the borough of Manchester, so it's the Trafford area, the south of Trafford, and we do lots of projects with the whole community, and part of that is Hidden Talent. We did work on Talent Match, and we absolutely loved working with the young people and getting them into work. And now we're on Hidden Talent, which has been a lot harder. We're just enjoying what we're doing. So, is that okay?
Yep, thanks, Tina.
Everything there.
And Janet, I can't see anyone else, so if you want to explain the role of a talent coach as well. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Yeah, my name's Janet. I work for a social enterprise. We're based in Oldham, Upturn Enterprise, but we actually cover Rochdale as well. So we engage and support young people, 18 to 25, fitting the criteria that Gavin went through, to help move them closer to the job market, really. So we're looking individually, we look at any barriers or challenges that the young person might have. That can cover a wide range of things, from personal to social behaviours. It can also be what's going on at home. It can be all sorts of trouble that's going on, and it may be that they have nowhere to live and that they're sofa surfing, and we need to sort that out as well. So we can try and encourage them to be responsible for their own lives, to take decisions for themselves, to try and get onto the benefit system and get the open doors that brings, so that can open up other supports. And they don't always realise that. So try to encourage them to start with that, and then we can start looking at housing, education, skills, employment, and sort of looking at moving them on, really. It can be light touch. We not all young people have barriers. There's a bit of a perception that all young people who are on the hidden that are all trouble, but they're not all trouble. There are some lovely young people that have just sat in a bedroom and maybe don't have the support from home, and just don't know where to turn once they leave school. So, and quite employable. So they just need a helping hand to point them in the right direction. So sometimes it can be a quick light touch. Sometimes it's months and years worth of support. So it's looking at that individual and working with them, helping them to explore ideas and values and beliefs, and building their confidence and life skills. We can and hopefully help them make that permanent successful transition into work or education. But it's very enjoyable. We have a good time. We meet some lovely people, and we've got some lovely stories and success stories. And yes, I've been involved with the talent match before Hidden, so I've been working with James CVO now for 7 years or so. Scary, really, when you think about it. But yeah, it's a great little project, and hopefully we'll be able to succeed with getting some further funding to keep it going, because it's definitely needed. Thank you, Zaina.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Janet. And I think as well, just before we go on to the next slide, that the work that the talent coaches have done during the pandemic and being able to carry on that one-to-one support, even though it's been virtual, has been fantastic. So I always take the opportunity to thank them as well. So I will do as well today. Thank you. There is wider support available as well as the talent coaches. So we do have a mental health practitioner who is funded through Hidden Talent. That means that the talent coaches can refer, and that person's employed by 42nd Street. There is the opportunity to join the youth panel, and that is facilitated by Greater Manchester Youth Network. And the youth panel have seats on the Greater Manchester, the Hidden Talent steering group. They have done peer reviews, so gone out and spoken to the young people direct about their experiences on Hidden Talent. They've done work with job centres about making them more accessible, and the youth obligation sessions, how to improve those. And then there's also beneficiary expenses as well. So the young people through the talent coaches will be able to claim for things like clothing or equipment or travel, and anything that is additional cost, they'll be able to claim for that through the beneficiary expenses. As well as, sorry, I'm trying to move the pictures out of the way so I can see the slide, but I keep clicking on next. There we go. I can see it now. So we speak at employer engagements, events, and host them such as today. And and Ben has spoken at events with the Good Employment Charter, apprenticeships, a Salford apprenticeships event that Ben spoke at. And then we've done toolkits as well. So I think Ben's going to put the link into the chat around the employee toolkits that we've produced. And they have been endorsed and adopted by the Good Employment Charter. So they're on the Good Employment Charter's website. And we've worked hard with the Good Employment Charter around the standards for employing and recruiting young people. And the last one, Be Clear, Remove Fear. The youth panel, they can work direct with employers to look at their recruitment methods and their adverts and the language that is used in the job description to just go through it really and look at the accessibility and whether you need to change it to make it more accessible. So they've done that with some employers one-to-one, where you send your job description and they can work with you to just check through it with you. Okay, so I'm going to end on a couple of quotes from young people. So over lockdown, had developed poor mental health and asked Reform Radio, which are our partners in Tameside. They sorted me out with help straight away, and now I'm back to normal and helping other people I know need, using what I've learned. And the other quote as well that comes from when the youth panel did peer reviews is, "My talent coach has turned my life around. I would be at rock bottom without her." So that's an overview of what we do on Hidden Talent and what the talent coaches do. But I'm going to hand back to Ben now. And if you do have any questions about Hidden Talent as a whole, then please put them in the chat and we'll get back to you. Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks for that, Gavin. Right, we're going to get you guys involved now by just doing a little kind of whiteboard exercise, not in Zoom. I'm going to share my screen again and show you. It's a soft piece of software called, it's an online app called Flinger, and it's, one second. There we go. That should be on screen now. Gav, can you give me a thumbs up? Is that popped up? Great, thank you. Yeah, so basically, there's two statements here, or questions rather. So for those of you who've maybe not employed young people with no or limited work experience or experience in the workplace, you can answer this question here in the green. So what do you imagine young people might have difficulty with when starting a job? For those of you who've seen young people with no or limited work experience have difficulties when starting a new job, you can answer the lilac colour over here. So my colleague Helen is going to share a link with you. You can just open in your browser, and basically I'll just show you now how it works. So at the top here, it works better if you use the person figure here. And obviously if you want to answer the green, you just select the green colour. If you wanted to answer the lilac, you would choose the lilac colour. So for example, I could just put here, not getting flustered, or I don't know, something you've seen young people struggle with, getting flustered after making a mistake. It's the worst thing in the world typing when there's 26 people watching. So if I press enter there, definitely not spelled flustered right, I can just drag that to that side. And if you're not happy with it, you can go back and edit it, or you can delete it. So Helen should have shared that in the chat now, the link to come to Flinger here. And if we can just try and pull some of our ideas, that will lead into the Q&A with the talent coaches. So yeah, you can just drag them over, or I can drag them over. I'll leave the screen sharing on so you can see what's popping up from people. So I'll just give people 2 or 3 minutes to populate that. Talent coaches, I'd ask that you don't do this because obviously you're more privy to perhaps some of the minor obstacles and barriers than perhaps some of our employers. So yeah, talent coaches, if you just kind of sit this one out and then we'll kind of bring you in. Good to see a lot of lilacs there, so people have experience of working with young people who've perhaps not worked before. I'll just try and spread some of these out. Okay, give it one more minute. Obviously, I'm zoomed out a bit here to try and keep an overview, but if you're still using the tab, you can zoom in and just scroll in on the right-hand side there to have a closer look at some of these. What we'll do then, I'm going to open up the floor to talent coaches to address some of these with a kind of pretty open question at the minute. If you want to ask any questions at any point of our talent coaches, you can either put a question in the chat and I'll stop intermittently from asking my predetermined questions to see what's in the chat. Or alternatively, you can put a hand up and my colleague Liz is just going to keep a track of who's got hands up and we'll take it from there. So it'll be a mix of me asking questions to the talent coaches and getting some of your questions put to them. Thanks ever so much for those contributions. There's a lot there. I'm going to ask, start with a good open question to any of the talent coaches on the call, and Sam. Sam is standing in for one of our talent coaches at Manchester Young Live. So, is there anything on here, and feel free to chip in, any one of you, which really strikes you as being one of the most common barriers for young people with limited work experience?
Ben, I'm just quick. I've been watching them pop up and recognise every single one of them, what the employers are saying, and understand I've been through them, all them barriers with young people. I don't know if one sticks out more than another, because it depends on the individual, but there's a lot about expectations and young people not understanding employers' expectations, and that equates to arriving on time, not getting involved in meetings. That's down to confidence and things like that. So it's just the young person not necessarily understanding their place within your business or your organisation. But yeah, 100% recognise all them issues and all them difficulties, and we've overcome them in the past. All of them. It's just working together with the employer. That's what we need to do.
I think the lunch was an issue for one of our young people. So because he was working and he had to work a month in hand, for the first couple of weeks we gave him £20. That didn't work, for his lunches. And then after that, because we've got the community cafe and it was only 5 minutes from where he was working, on the way to work every day, he'd pick up his lunch and a can, and that just really broke the back of it. So I do witness, that, like Ian just said, there's quite a lot on there that you can identify with. But that was just one that just stuck out then.
Dave, was there anything you wanted to comment on before I ask some more pointy questions about specific contributions?
Yeah, definitely. I can add on to that. Again, I can relate to everything that's popping up there, which partly I think is a telling sign of going through the school system, a college system, and many young people are coming out educated with very much work skills or understanding of like the workplace, so we're not really work ready. That's the beauty about a program like what we're involved in. It's our job to get people work ready, because we do understand that the ultimate responsibility for the young people for being work ready is on the young people, but there are certain areas what they can be unsure of. So it is about being confident about asking questions, also from the employer not to expect that they already know this, because if they are 18, quite often it's the first experience of work anyway, because right now you've got to go to school and you've got to go to college till you're 18 unless you're on some form of traineeship or apprenticeship. So it is about having that kind of understanding from the employer's point of view that certain things may not be clear. And also we encourage young people to ask questions. If you don't know, ask, rather than try and do something what you're not sure about. Timekeeping, again, I keep seeing it popping up there. That's a massive issue. So, when we've got a caseload of young people and we make relationships with employers, we're constantly working on young people to get in work ready. Massive part of that is around timekeeping, good attitude, because that's half the battle, more than half the battle most of the time, because if you've got a good timekeeping, you've got a good attitude, you're keen to learn, then the employer's going to invest their time into you to show you the role and to develop. So we're always very conscious about who we are putting forward to that employer, and quite rightly so, because we'd be setting young people up to fail otherwise if we don't believe they've got a lot of the skills that they do need to be work ready. So we definitely understand a lot of the issues which are popping up and which are quite similar. So yeah, but that's why a program like this exists, is to kind of get rid of some of them barriers and to explain some of them and to support them to be more confident and work ready.
In terms of, just before we kind of talk about solutions, I might just open this up to again all the coaches. This idea that I've seen, it's a recurring theme here from the employers saying lack of confidence. I wonder if any one of you guys, talent coaches, could just say where that lack of confidence comes from, and why there is a lack of confidence amongst young people who've maybe not worked before. It might be obvious, but I think until you need to understand where young people are coming from. So if anyone wants to answer that.
Well, I'm already unmuted, so I can put my opinion there. So I think we're living in a very different world where technology is very much a big part of young people's lives, and their communication is very much technology based around text messaging, and so they're confident in one-to-one. I've seen pop up there, and that asking questions face to face is very different, much more confident when they're online or kind of using some form of social media. That doesn't help confidence in the real world, unfortunately. So that's something sort of new we've got to expect. But also, I think I'd ask everybody who's on this conference, how confident is you on your first day at work? It's not unusual to not be confident on your first day at work. It's a scary thing. Your first day at college, your first day at school, they're all scary first steps. And so I think there's something here saying what they expect from work to the actual realities. That's the expectations can be quite scary until we've got through the door and they've understood that it's not that bad and it's not that scary. So some confident issues are absolutely to be expected, which we've all had, and I think there's definitely a place social media has had to play, or technology has had to play in the confidence of speaking one-to-one and face-to-face.
Thanks, Dave. Did anyone want to add to that? Janet?
Yeah, please. I still go on, and I know I'm getting old, but I worked from the age of 13, 14, as I'm sure many other people did. But nowadays, there's just no opportunities for young people to get part-time jobs and be able to make mistakes, be able to build the confidence, be able to learn those work skills. So, yeah, when they're going to work at 18, lots of the personalities, the their securities, their confidences have grown in other things, but nothing around any work ethics, nothing around talking to other people, nothing around being late, nothing around any work skills whatsoever. They've just never done it. So, you know, you can understand why they've got no confidence, because they've just never had to do it whatsoever. And, you know, the day that they took away the ruling for young people to be able to go and work at 14 to 16, it was in my view, was the really wrong decision to make. Young people need to have an area where they can learn things, but be okay to make the mistake. You know, if you get that first job now and you've waited and you've worked hard, you've been to college, you've got your qualifications, and this is your dream job, and you make some mistakes and lose it, that's devastating. Whereas if you go and work on a market or in a cafe and you make a mistake and you lose your job, it's not the end of the world. You know, you go and get another one and you've learned from that mistake. But now these jobs, they take so long to get, and the young people are working so hard to get them. And they are frightened of making mistakes, but they don't know what the mistakes are. So confidence is a really, really difficult one. And I think, you know, we need to work really hard on saying that like Dave said, that it's okay to be scared. It's okay to not have that confidence. And the only confidence that you need to have is to turn up and to ask any questions that you can, because, you know, this is important. But the people that are surrounding you in those workplaces want you to succeed. They're not all your enemies. They want you to succeed. They want you to work you know, in the right way, so that you don't lose your job. So to trust in the other people around them, I think, is a big key to getting them to open up to colleagues and to their other peers in a work environment. And that's the only way that we can increase that confidence, really.
Thanks, Janet. We're lucky to have a young person on the call with us today. We've got Kizza, who is a member of our youth panel that Gavin, our programme manager, talked about the youth panel earlier. Kizza, I don't know if there's anything you think that might be missing from here, or anything that you think has had relevance for you when you first started in a volunteering role. Is there anything that really stands out to you amongst the employers' contributions there?
I'm just looking at it now.
You can always come back in if you want to have a little look, Kizza, and I think. Do you want me to come back to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Sorry, I did just totally put you on the spot. So yeah, if you want to just put your hand up, Kizza, then Liz will see when you've sort of got some. You've had a little think. I mean, Janet, going back to your point there about we want young people to come in and ask questions, I think, is it perhaps about some of the employers just double and triple checking things with young people? I think I'm thinking specifically around, there's a lot on the screen there around reporting about timekeeping and turning up on time. Is it those constant reminders, and being, and a link to turning up on time is absence, and the importance of reporting absence and how you manage that. I don't know if any of the coaches want to talk about absences and how those can be managed by employers.
I think it's important to explain that the importance of it in the bigger picture. So by you not being here, that affects the next person, the next person, and the next person. And I think just by saying you're late or punishing whatever, they need to see the bigger picture. They need to understand why it is really important that they've not turned up or they're late, and see how that affects the business. You know, at the end of the day, they're there to help this business make some money, and that they need to understand how their little role fits in, I think. And then they can start to, these young people aren't stupid. They've just not been in these environments before, so they don't understand. So, they can be flexible. They can adapt. They've got great adaptability of young people, as we've seen over the last 6, 7, 8, 9 months that they've had to cope with schools and colleges and working from home, even in their first jobs. They've had to adapt to massive things. They can. I just think they need to understand why.
I think, yeah, thanks, Janet. I mean, I remember a conversation I had with Martina, who's one of our talent coaches who isn't on the call, and she was talking about young people might, when reporting an absence, they might just ring in, it might go to a voicemail. They might ring the general reception number and think, well, I've done my bit now. But unless they're told very clearly, no, this is who you report to, this is who you need to explain why you're absent, what the issue is, give them a backup number, give them a clear line of instructions as to how you do that. Because, yeah, they might just send a text and think, oh, I've done my bit now, I'm okay, I'm off the hook. And Ian, I'll just come to you. I know you've talked about the significance of young people not understanding probation periods and the impact of time off then.
Yeah, it's a common theme, really. And it's a difficult one. I think I've talked to you about this before, but I had a young person who took 2 days off sick in his first week, and then was surprised because he was like, well, it's only 2 days. And we're like, yeah, but it's your first week. And trying to get that across to him was really difficult. I don't know if it's a lack of understanding. That seems so obvious that you should be able to understand that that is something you shouldn't be doing. But maybe we make the mistake of just presuming that, of course it's obvious. He thought, well, I'm on a 6-month trial. Well, I'll take 2 days off this week and I'll be in next week. Don't worry about that. I don't think he didn't realise the true impact those 2 days, the negative effect it would have, and what the employer would think going forward. Yeah, it's a difficult from an employer's point of view. You would think they'd think, well, this is obvious stuff. Should we have to tell people that, you you shouldn't be taking time off? And but it is better to clarify these things. I think a lot of us go into jobs now and it's our 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th job. You get through your induction, you're just ticking boxes. And we forget sometimes that actually you need to remind people when it is the first job, and when they've just been through a system where they probably didn't fit in. They've spent their whole life going through an educational system where they didn't fit in and didn't really understand, and they've gone into this new system now. And it does need explaining right from the beginning, the do's and don'ts in the workplace, and some just basic stuff people have failed on, really. And I suppose that's down to us not explaining things fully. Loads of examples of people doing things that we know they shouldn't do. But it's just lack of understanding, really, rather than any malice in it.
Can I just jump in, Ben, and ask the talent coaches about the question that has come up in the chat from Samantha from Food in 8 about that balance between giving the young people the information and overloading them? If the talent coaches have got any tips around that.
I think for me, one of the things that we've realised, so through trying to support young people into the workplace, and as a company as well, that obviously are employers, I think one of the key things that we've realised is you have your file with all your policies in it, and your policy file can have about 50 policies in it, and the wording can be quite jargon in there. And then some employers will give you an employee handbook, which is basically snippets of policies put into an employee handbook, which is exactly the same. So where you're talking about overwhelming and giving too much information, something that we've kind of looked at is, rather than giving an employee handbook, is an employee to-do book, which is exactly the same. So instead of it being something to read, it's something that they interact with over that first week. So it could be like simple questions like, who is my supervisor? What time do my shift start? What's my working week pattern going to look like? Who do I report to if I'm in sick? And they then physically have to go around and ask those questions, and it's building that confidence again to ask those questions because they're there in front of them. Because I think even as a manager myself, when I do an induction, unless I've got a sheet in front of me that reminds me exactly what I need to go through with that new employer, I may forget, but then they might come back and ask me those questions. But again, if they've not got the confidence to ask, they're not going to know, and it might be a bit of important information that I've missed out. So I think by looking at what information we are giving, it can be overwhelming. And I think even us as adults, when you take on a new role yourself, you get used to certain things and you know certain things and what to expect. But for a young person, it's looking at it from, we were all young once and how did we feel going into an employment. So yeah, so it's, for us, we've looked at it from a different perspective. Instead of an employee handbook, it's a question and answer book for the young person to be able to ask, which has really, really worked, and it's really been beneficial.
Thanks, Samantha. There's a question from Beth Smith in the chat here, just saying, do you have any examples from the to-do book and whether we can share those, Sam? I mean, I don't know if you can share some of those with me after the event, and I can share them round. I think you're on mute, Sam.
So I actually got a printout, but it was just literally, I don't know if you can see. So it's just a simple handbook, and then it's got the little questions. Yes, it is a long document. It is like 26 pages back to back, but it literally covers everything that you would in your employee handbook. But at least with the young people having the questions there, they know they need to ask it, and they know that it's important information. But yeah, more than happy to share this with you, Ben, that you can share on to everybody else. That's absolutely fine.
Thanks, Sam. I know one of our other organisations that we partner with, who they're not on the call today, I don't think, Groundwork, they do some work with the Prince's Trust, and they've got a similar sort of tool, similar sort of guide. So I can share that. They've said we can share that round as well. And I can see there's some more being shared in the chat. Just to go back to a point that was raised, who was it? I think it was Lucy from Cartwheel Arts. About phoning in sick, saying underconfident, and that might be a factor. I think I've spoken to talent coaches before who've said, yes, you need to unpick the reasons for absence sometimes and go and look at what's really going on. Do any of you guys want to answer that and talk about how employers can actually do that and have those conversations around seeing what's really the reason for an absence?
I think that's the beauty about a program like us. If the employer has a relationship with somebody who's behind the young person, like a hidden coach, obviously that's only a very small percentage of young people. So that's great to have that kind of, to be able to phone up and say, listen, Dave, I think there's something not quite right. You've got that relationship with the young person. Can you just have a quick chat? That happens quite often. So, they're fortunate we're in a position to be able to do that. Other than that, it depends on the workplace. Some workplaces have the time. Some workplaces are that pressured. They need to get the job done. Everyone's running around. We live in a very fast workplace in society where we don't always feel we have the time to ask our, whether they're younger or older, whether they're all right, whether everything's okay. We don't always know what's going on in people's home lives. The current climate is a very uncertain time for us all, young or old. So yeah, having that, trying to build that relationship, or having that time to just say, is everything all right? That quiet moment to just say, is everything okay? Because sometimes if they're willing to speak, they'll speak, and they will speak in a quiet time when they are. That's that. And sort of touching upon what Ian said before, I think we have the expectations that all young people come from potentially the same kind of system as many of us on here would have done. And it's not always the case. There's a lot of young people who come from alternative education systems, pre-schools, which is pupil referral units. Just as a quick example, I worked with a young person who went from a pupil referral unit into a mainstream college, and I was mentoring him within the college, and halfway through a lesson in the college, he just stood up and walked out, and the tutor was like, what are you doing? But he was allowed to do that in his previous school. He didn't think he was doing anything wrong. There was very different boundaries for him because of the different setting that he was in. Whereas it was clear that once you've had enough, you can stand up and you can walk out. Now, can you imagine doing that in an employment, in a workplace? It just wouldn't be acceptable. So sometimes they've been taught things that it's okay to do that. It's okay to just stand up and walk out or go home or whatever like that, and it's completely acceptable. Then all of a sudden it's not. So it's very easy for us to say it's common sense. It's common sense if you know it. It's common sense if that's the kind of environment you're used to. It's not always common sense to young people from different, not different backgrounds, coming from different systems. And sometimes young people coming from that kind of systems, it's absolutely fantastic work. They've got a great work ethic. It's all they want to do. They just don't fit the education system, and they've been set very different barriers than what many of us are used to.
Yeah, similar to that, Dave. I mean, it's you know, on the one, there's an anecdote from another coach who's not on the call, and it is funny, but it's not at the same time. She's saying one young person didn't turn up for, it was, college was on a break, so they were an apprentice, but they were meant to be in with their employer that week, even though college was on a break, and the employer rang up and was sort of saying, well, where are you? Well, it's half term. Well, it's not half term, you're working, but it's, that's, you know, it's just that lack of understanding, and it's kind of maybe that first warning that that young person gets is the most important warning they'll ever get, and the penny will drop. Liz, sorry, I've not come to you. Are there any hands up from employers? I've been asking a lot of questions. Are there any hands up at all?
No, there's not. There's no. There aren't any hands raised that I can see on the participant list.
No worries. I mean, people, you know, it's, if you hover over your name in the participants, if you click participants and hover over your name, you can raise a hand, or equally just keep dropping questions in the chat. I'm just going to hello. Yep.
Can I just add quickly? I used to work for an organisation where we supported people with really significant barriers into work, and one of the biggest issues we always had with employers was following procedure, because they were very nervous if somebody had a disability or somebody was a young person, and for all the right reasons they wanted to support them, and they were very nervous about going down disciplinary routes, and we encourage that, because you just hit the nail on the head. It's a learning lesson. Their first job is not going to be their last job, but they've got to learn the lessons. They're adults now, and they're not young people in colleges, and they're not, you know, they've got to learn these lessons, and sometimes they're tough. But the best thing is to do is be really open and honest with them. And if you would take somebody else down a disciplinary route, you know, they shouldn't get away with it because they're a young person or because they're from a certain background. It can be done sensitively and it can be done in the right way, but they need to learn a lesson as well. I think it's really important that.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, that's a really interesting point, isn't it? It's not making allowance for when something needs to be called out, it needs to be called out. I'm just looking at some of the other points here around rules and phone use. Is one that I know all the talent coaches have spoken to me about, young people being glued to their phone. I think it goes back to a point I think Janet was making earlier in the conversation around explaining why the rule is there. So not just reprimanding somebody or a young person, but explaining that, well, don't do that because don't have your headphones in because your teammates can't get hold of you. Because I guess if you've had, like Dave said, if you've worked with young people who've been in PRUs or they've had a really difficult educational procession through the education system, they don't, you know, rules are sometimes going to be difficult for some young people. Of course, they need to follow the rules. It's work, it's a job, but at least give them the reason for why the rule exists. I don't know if any of the talent coaches want to talk about setting tasks appropriately. Tina, I know this has been kind of a concern for you when you've attended interviews with young people, and actually not setting the bar too high for young people and sort of setting young people up to fail with a job that they're just not going to be able to manage.
Yeah. Is it on picture there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can, Tina, yeah.
I think it is about having clear guidelines and a clear job description. As one of the young people got a job in a care home, and basically I wasn't really very happy. I sat at the interview with her and they gave her the job and she went on some training, but then she was working in a care home with, I think there was 20 odd patients, and there was only 2 staff on at night and she was one of them. And I felt that wasn't appropriate. She wasn't comfortable there anyway, because, you know, she was only, I think she was 19, and it's just very difficult when I felt as though she was just another body, instead of it being actually a job with training, which the employer said that's what it was going to be. It was going to be full training, full apprenticeship, and it was just totally inappropriate. That has put that young person off wanting to work in a care home. And now with the coronavirus as well, and the scare over care homes, she doesn't want to ever go in one again. So it's you know, it is about setting the task, setting the role, and keeping to that, keeping the roles, you know, of the job description, and not just being there just to assist somebody else just because they're short of staff. So I hope that's all right, Ben.
No, thanks, Tina. Yeah, really. Thank you. I wonder, just before we go to a break, could I call on the person who contributed this one here, the reality of work versus what they think it'll be, if you're willing to speak. Yeah, could someone say, sort of reference that scenario?
Yeah, that was me. So I used to work in a bike project. We had a lot of apprenticeships, and I think particularly we used to employ people with a lot of vulnerable adults, so people with mental health issues who might have been institutionalised for quite a while, and they'd had all these kind of hopes and dreams of what they could do. They finally got this opportunity, and actually they have to work their way up. You know, that they're not going to be able to get stuck in. There's a massive learning curve, and a lot of the problems that we had were around that. We had a lot of outreach staff, but I don't think we had the resources to be able to kind of manage those expectations as much as was needed in that project. And yeah, I think they thought they were going to be kind of, they've done the basic city and guilds training, and I think they thought they were going to be kind of fully fledged bike mechanics, when actually the training takes, the on-the-job training for that job takes about 2 to 3 years to become fully competent. And a lot of young people weren't willing to work towards that. I think it was because of the expectations that they had coming into it.
Thanks, Samantha. Has anyone got any sort of pointers they could offer in terms of, keeping aspirations in check, and how to manage aspirations and not, just keeping track of people's desire to just want to move onwards and upwards too quickly?
Without knocking their confidence and their aspirations as well. You don't want to, it's just quite, it's a tricky one to balance.
Has anyone got any views on that at all? Employers or talent coaches, people can chip in on that.
I think
go on, sorry.
It's just that a lot of, I understand what Samantha's saying there to some respect, because if they come out of colleges thinking with their BTECs or whatever they've got, thinking that they know it all in some cases, and yes, you do have to have that conversation, but I think the colleges are a lot to blame for that, because they bullying them up. They're telling them they've got these qualifications and they're trained to go, when they've not. They've got a BTEC, and a BTEC is knowledge of and why we do things. It doesn't mean to say that you can actually physically do it. So, you know, the competence, I understand what Sam's saying, that, you know, you need to be on the job to learn how to do the job, and to be able to do that, you need to start at the bottom. You might have done your BTEC to understand why you're doing something, but it doesn't mean to say that you can actually physically do it. And I think the colleges have got to take some responsibility for that.
Thanks, Janet.
You just said exactly what I was going to say. I see it all the time. Colleges are definitely not helping in this kind of situation, whereas you're signing up for a course. I had a number of examples, one where they did a plumbing course, 2-year plumbing course, considered themselves and was told no different, that there was a fully qualified plumber at the end of it. We managed to get him an apprenticeship doing plumbing, but he was sweeping up, fetching tools, he was doing all the labouring work, and he wasn't happy about it because he considered himself as a qualified plumber. As I say, he had some skills, and you know, he was well on his way, but they couldn't just leave him alone to fit a central heating system, because he was nowhere near that standard. He realised it when they asked him to hang a radiator, because he said he could do it, and it turned out he couldn't. He could do it in a college, in a controlled environment where the pipe work was there and the wall was the same as what he's done it on 100 times. Doing it in somebody's house is very different, and he couldn't do it. So we did realise that. So it's not always the best to find out you can't do something when you're actually faced with it. And I've seen young people doing job searches with me, and I turn around and go back to they're looking at 100 grand a year site manager jobs, and they've not even got a CSCS card, or be college or done anything like that. And it's about just setting expectations, like, yeah, great to have that ambition, but we've got to have a starting point. You're not going to walk on a site and be a site manager straight off. It just doesn't work like that, and you have to have them very real conversations with. But I echo what you say there about the colleges. It's about setting expectations from when they leave, because it's not a great sell saying, yeah, you can do 2 years or 3 years as a bricklayer, but you're not going to be a qualified bricklayer. That might not be a great sell at the beginning when they sign up for a course.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, just finally before a break, I guess to follow on from that, if someone really believes they've had the wind blown up them and they really think they can go and smash something out of the park, when they do come to that mistake or that thing that they can't do, I imagine that has the potential to be doubly crushing if you've really sort of built yourself up. So is it perhaps just about, once that mistake's been made or that task's been confronted that you've just not been able to solve, it's about, okay, don't worry about this, it's fine, it's not to be expected, it's to be expected. We didn't expect you to be able to do that, and just take that nurturing approach when someone is just confronted with something they can't do. What I'll do now, we have run over a little bit, but it's fine, because after the break we were just kind of mopping up the question and answer session before we move into smaller rooms and we really hear from you guys and what you're doing with your own inductions. So Kizza, I'll come back to you after the break. I've not forgotten you. But if we stop now, it's sort of 6 minutes past 11. If we sort of come back in 5 minutes time, just grab a brew, run to the loo, make that phone call, whatever you need to do, and we'll sort of reconvene at sort of 11, 12 minutes past. And yeah, if you want to keep adding in the chat between now and then, feel free to. But yeah, I'll see everyone back here in 5 minutes time. Thank you. Right, so we'll let people just trickle back in. We'll have another sort of 10 to 15 minutes of finishing off this Q&A session with the talent coaches before the breakout room session. Kizza, I don't know, was there anything that you thought was missing at all from the board in terms of what a young person might struggle with when first starting somewhere, or something that particularly resonated with you and your experiences of having been the new younger person starting somewhere?
Well, when I first started with kind of any volunteer or employment, I found it a bit easier when you had like a induction. So either before you started the job, you either got a phone call or like you got to meet the employer. They showed you around everywhere. They told you about all the rules. That made it a bit easier. It was also helpful if you had like another young person there as well, because it helps if it's someone your age, because they're going through the same thing. And if it's someone who's already in that job who's near your age, it's easier to hear from them than to hear from someone who's older. I think it's personally, I found like the confidence thing was the biggest one, because when I first started, I didn't really have any. I hadn't been in a job before. I didn't know what it was going to be like. So I think it would be useful if it, like having that whole induction thing would be incredibly useful.
Thanks, Kizza. I think, yeah, to go to focus on your point, I'm glad you raised it rather than me, because it's an assumption on my part. I'm not a young person anymore. That point about working with other young people alongside them is part of that, because you'd feel more comfortable asking questions of somebody who's not long since started themselves. You still there, Kizza? Is that because you'd feel more comfortable asking, be approaching that other young person in the team perhaps, rather than someone more senior?
Yeah, because they might be able to give you tips on like how to manage things. If I sometimes find it difficult to kind of get to places on time, so if it's like another young person, we can probably plan our route together if we live in like the same area, or we can meet up in a place before we get to the job site.
Yeah, just that mutual support system, isn't it? Especially, you're starting on the same day as someone else, and being, maybe the employer making that introduction before you start. For you've got a couple of young starters, gives them, that's something that can be done.
I kind of agree with what other people have said about colleges or schools not being as supportive. I think when I was in back in education, it was more about there wasn't as much employability support there. When we kind of got like work experience and stuff, there's no kind of like when you go into like a proper job, they didn't really they told you about how everything works, whereas with schools they didn't really do that. And if they told us about that a lot earlier on, it would have made it a lot easier.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point, Kizza, for the employers on the call today. It's not all on them. We know it's, the structures within which employers operate need to change a bit. The education system probably needs to be better linked to the demands of the skills demands of the economy. And I know there are schemes like Bridge GM that the combined authority operate, which does a lot of outreach work, taking businesses into schools. So I think there's a movement towards more of that earlier employer engagement in education settings. But for people, how old are you, kids? Are you
21.
21, yeah. It's kind of these schemes of, they were talking things that have started the last couple of years or so. So perhaps your experience is different. No, thanks a lot for that, Kizza. Just to open up back to the coaches again. We've not really touched on pay yet and some of the confusion that might arise around interpretation of pay. I know someone mentioned in passing being paid a week in hand, but I don't know if anyone else could talk about what might cause confusion with young people and getting the first paycheck.
I can sort of speak briefly if nobody. Yeah, there's a lot of confusion, particularly in your first job, and universal credit sort of helps and sort of doesn't, because it pays you sort of behind. So you might think you're getting your universal credit, and then all of a sudden it doesn't come in, or you get a big lump sum of universal credit after you've been paid and think, oh wow, I'm going to get universal credit as well, and then the next month it's not there. I think the onus is definitely on us, obviously, in that situation. Employers can sort of say you need to get some advice if you're on a benefit, how that's going to affect you and things like that. But again, it's just this like analogy. I had a young girl, really intelligent young girl, single parent, who got a job, a really good job, and came back to me a month or so later and said, my rent's not been paid, I don't understand. So I said, oh, right, okay, why haven't you paid it? So she said, well, housing benefit haven't paid it anymore. And I said, yeah, because that's you're working now. You're responsible for your bills. And that was my oversight. I didn't realise I would need to explain that. But she'd always had her rent paid for it. And she didn't think that would change when she went into work. So we just need to be clear, because I do think that can then they get that impression in their head of, well, what am I working for then? I've just been, I used to have everything paid for and now I don't.
I fell into the working the week in hand trap myself with my own son a couple of weeks ago. He started work a few weeks ago, and I told him he was working a week in hand, and I assumed he knew what that meant, but he didn't. So it came to the end of the week, he didn't get paid. He didn't like to ask his boss why he didn't get paid, so he asked me. I said, no, because you're working a week in hand. And he'd made great plans to take his girlfriend for a meal that weekend with his first paycheck and everything like that, and he was really disappointed that he didn't get paid. So it's again maybe that week in hand. What does that actually mean? What does a week in hand actually mean? It's not a very clear term. So if you say to somebody you're going to work a week in hand, then maybe very clear about what that actually means. Yeah, it's just words, isn't it? Unless you know the meaning behind it.
I think giving an example is the key, isn't it? It's not just saying you do realise you're going to get paid a week in hand. Give them a date. Your first payday will be here, and you will be paid this amount. Because otherwise, it doesn't mean much. We're paid 2 weeks in front and 2 weeks behind. I still can't get my head around that. I still don't know what it means.
I'm the same.
I don't even want to know what it means. Yeah, I don't care anymore. I get paid. End of story.
No, you're right,
yeah.
and it's just easy to overlook it. Like I say, I work with young people, I've done for many years, and I even overlooked it with my own son to explain what working a week in hand actually meant. So it's sometimes we can just overlook things like that because we assume, because we know.
So us as an organisation, we that is part of our induction with the young people when they're going to get back into work. And we actually set something up where we lent them £50 a week, and then when they get paid, they have to pay that back. I think we've only had one that never paid it back, but sometimes you've just got to take a risk. And we took that risk, and it has worked with quite a few young people. So it's just something that we do.
Yeah, we do something very similar. Like the first week at work, we'll pay our travel expenses because we've not been paid yet. So we'll pay our travel expenses. We'll buy dinners. We'll do things like that just to make that week easier, just to remove any of them kind of barriers where I can't get there. Well, now you can because the bus passed there. Get your dinner, if your dinner's been paid for. We'll even take you on your first day just so you know where it is and make sure you're there on time. So yeah, these little things like that. So
yeah, we I think that, like Ian said, the 2 week before and the 2 week after thing just doesn't make sense at all, does it, to anybody, us, let alone the little ones? But I think being very clear is the key thing, like Ian said, really, and making sure that there's a day and they know how much they're going to get, because it's that starting point in the month, isn't it? So if you start on a 17th or you start on the 1st, and it just all makes a difference to that pay salary, and they don't get that. And then so what we do is we try to give them a cash advance at the same. So if they're not going to be paid the full salary on that first month and they're going to need that money, the benefits stopped or whatever its situation is, we try to give them that a cash advance as an employer. So I'm not talking as a talent coach. So as an employer, we'll give our apprentices a cash advance to tide them over in their jobs, and then it comes out of their next month's salary, just to sort of make sure that they've got some money for that first month that they've worked. Because sometimes, depending on the date that they start, they may have nothing due or hardly anything due that first month. So it can be quite frustrating for them, I think, pay. And it's understanding that pay slip as well. They're paying tax and all these other things that start going out. They haven't got a clue, it's why is someone taking money out of my money, they just don't understand it. So I think explaining the pay ticket to them is important as well. They know where their money's going. But I try not to get involved in payroll because it's too complicated, isn't it?
Thanks, Janet. Yeah, just bring Louise, you've shared in the chat there, you've similarly had someone who didn't understand the tax implications of being on a paid internship. Did you just need to sit that young person down and really talk them through the deductions?
Well, I tried. So when I used to work at a college, I put a student on an internship that was paid for 6 weeks, and then when her payslip came through, she already had a part-time job, and this was classed as a second job, so it was 40% tax or whatever it was at the time. So HMRC aren't the easiest to navigate at the best of times, so just had to try and go on the website, see how she could claim it back, and go through the necessary forms. But yeah, it was just a bit of a shock, I guess, that so much of her pay had been taken, even though she's still a student. So it was just trying to find the right advice on the website and guiding her through that, really. But I don't think she could claim it back until the end of the tax year. If I remember rightly, this is a few years ago, which was probably like April next year, and this was summer the previous year. So that's just, if you do work with young people and they do already have a part-time job, and you're offering them maybe a summer internship, 6, 8, 10 weeks, that might be something to raise with them, that they might be getting taxed more because it's classed as a second job.
Thanks, Louise. Yeah, Lucy's question there, see Janet's answered that about asking if HMRC are okay with cash advances and deducting that from first pay. I don't know if that's something you could check with Maria, maybe, Janet, and we could get a bit of clarity to Lucy, because I won't pretend that I know the intricacies of payroll. So if that's maybe something we could chase up, Janet, and get a definitive answer to Lucy. Great, thanks everyone. And we could sit here and chat a lot more about young people's circumstances. We didn't touch everything on the Flinger slide from before, but such are the pressures of time. So we will, Liz, are you kind of at a point where you're all right with having organised who's going into what breakout rooms? I know that's a bit of a fiddle.
Yeah, no, I've done it, but there was just one little technical issue, Ben. So the host, obviously, I'm now technically the host. That means I can't go into a breakout room. So you need to take hosting back off me.
Okay, so.
And then when we launch the breakout rooms, I'll be left in the middle like a numpty. You need to put me in breakout room 2.
Right, okay.
Kizzo, don't panic. I've not left you in a room on your own. I'm coming. It'll just take a little bit longer.
Right. I think you might have to make me back to host, Liz. I don't think I can request that. So you might have to make me a co-host first.
Ah, okay.
Or you make me a host. Right, so what we're going to do, guys, whilst we sort of resolve the intricacies of moving people around, when we go into breakout rooms, there'll be a talent coach in every room. There'll be someone from the project team, the hidden talent team in every room, and those people will facilitate. So, Helen, do you want to just say hello and give people a wave?
Hi, I'm Helen. I'm the Partnerships Officer on Hidden Talent.
Thanks, Helen. So Helen will be in one room facilitating. Vicky, do you want to say hello?
Hi, I'm Vicky. I'm the Administrator for Hidden Talent.
Thanks, Vicky. Gav, we've already met, but yeah, just want to remind people. Your face, there we go. And then Liz, who I've been talking to just then, will be facilitating another room. So when we've gone into the rooms, like about 10, 15 minutes, probably 15 minutes, just to explain one thing you do in your inductions that you think works well for young people, or just staff in general. It doesn't have to be young person specific. And then another thing that you think, either based on what you've heard today, or just you've had sort of in the pipeline for a while, that could improve your induction processes. If you're not at the point of making changes, or if you haven't inducted young people before, maybe at the start of a recruitment drive, maybe just something you picked up on today that you think I'll definitely take that on board. So yeah, one thing you think you do well, one thing you'd like to improve with your inductions for young people, and if you haven't inducted recently or not planning to, maybe just one thing you think down the line you could use. We will go into breakout rooms now. There'll be a talent coach in every room as well. So again, if you want to just, if you know, when you're talking about a thing you might want to introduce as an induction, you can just cross-reference that with the talent coach. Liz, are we good to go?
You'll now need to do it as your host, so you should have the breakout room button at the bottom now, and you should just be able to launch breakout rooms.
I don't think if it saved those rooms from before, Liz.
Oh, you're kidding me.
It's all right. I'll do it quickly now.
Make me the host. I'll do it again. It's fine.
Okay. Such are the vagaries of the Zoom sphere.
This is fine, because it's just in a physical event, everyone would be walking to the room, so it's just that same delay.
Liz, you can just put me in a room and you can be the floater. It's fine. If anyone had any other questions for talent coaches now, feel free to put one across whilst Liz Beaver's away.
Sorry, it's Louise again. I'm just some young people I'm working with, mainly in schools, have got restrictions on physical visitors, and so we're trying to just look at our ways we can get involved with young people, whether it's workshops or CVs or, you know, interview skills or placements, but in a virtual capacity. And we might be doing a bit of work with speakers for schools on this, but it'd just be interesting to see if a lot of people are moving their inductions to maybe virtual capacities, or just doing extra work as part of some of these programs in a virtual capacity, how they found that, or because a lot of people use different systems, and just any feedback really, or, you know, tips on using things. It's quite good today using this this whiteboard facility, so I might steal that and use it in some of our activities. But just anyone's thoughts really on this, navigating through this current pandemic really.
Louise, we've been doing a bit of we do sort of recruitment for local companies. And we used to do big group sessions because we wanted to see people's personalities. We wanted to see how they interacted with each other. And we've just lost that overnight. But we're still doing recruitment. And we've produced a lot of videos and things like that that we've got out on YouTube. And we're inviting them back into some very small socially distanced groups. But in similar to you, I would love if anybody's got any ideas of how we can sort of get that back, what we had, of how can we see people's personalities and, you know, their team working skills. How can we do that over virtually, really? Because we're missing out on that. And I think some people, the reason we did that is because some people didn't do well in interviews, and we knew that. But you put them in a bridge building competition, and they shone and they got on with everybody, and they delegated, and we're really trying to find a way that we can get that back. Unfortunately, we haven't found a way yet. But the advice would be very.
We have a central team that does our apprenticeships, and they're looking at moving the assessment centre that we normally do to a virtual capacity, although I've not really had a discussion with them how they see that looking. But we used to do because we're an engineering firm, we used to do a building activity to actually see how their skills are hands-on. So it'd be interesting to see what our team are going to do to try and overcome that. Whether they're going to send them materials and then give them 5 minutes on camera, I'm not sure. But like you said, Ian, if anyone's got any ideas on overcoming that team working, building exercises just to really bring young people or not just young people out of their shell, that would be interesting to see.
I can try and chase with some construction contacts, Louis, to see if what they're doing perhaps around the virtual task completion, if you like. But I know that the Together Trust in Stockport have been running virtual inductions for young people. So they're not on the call today, but they might have some tips. So I can hook you in with them around what they might have been doing for more of a pastoral side of thing, and then try and see if any of the construction contacts have got anything more practical around the actual task setting that you would traditionally do in person. Liz, are we looking okay? Or sweet, right? So we'll move into breakout rooms now. So again, one thing you do well in inductions, and one thing you might want to improve with a view to young people, but it can be more widely. Hey everybody, that seems to have eventually worked. So it's that nervous moment when you get deposited into another virtual space somewhere. Yeah, I've got Kizza in the room here as well. So if there's anything you intend to change with your inductions for young people, you can always run that past Kizza. Yeah, I don't know if Daisy, you're first on my screen. I don't know if you want to start by sharing anything you think you do particularly well with your induction processes at the minute, or?
Well, I'm not an employer.
Okay.
I'm not an employer. I work for Rochdale Council.
Okay.
A career broker, Liz career broker, working. We just got a young person in our project that starts an apprenticeship, and I find this course so useful in terms of how I can support him from now on, in terms of being clear. I love the ideas. So I'm really in a learning seat here with you guys. So I'm not an employer, but I am kind of taking loads of notes. But the one issue that we have with this lad, that we suspect that he's somewhere in the spectrum, autism, has not been diagnosed, and there is a lot of young people that could be on that spectrum and has not been identified in school. So for me, it's interesting to see with other coaches, how you approach that aspect of with young people as well. So
I can make a link. She's not on the call today, Daisy, but another one of our talent coaches. She works in Bury, but she'd be happy to chat with you. Sorry, my phone. She has supported a lot of young people with learning disabilities and young people on the autism spectrum. So yeah, she's got some good tips around how to break down tasks and some good examples of where young people have struggled when they've been given too much information at first. So
Yeah, that would be very useful. Thank you. If you, I will put my email on.
Yeah.
Oh, I think you guys have my email.
I'll have your email from having signed up, Daisy, but I will link you in with our talent coach, Eva. Thank you.
Yeah.
Gabriella, hiya. I don't know if there's anything, I don't know if you're an employer per se, or is there anything you do particularly well with your inductions?
Yeah, so one of the things that we have done normally face-to-face, but have done virtually, is we do like a dragon's den. So what we do is split them into different groups and then get them to pitch an idea. And we work for a technology company, but to be honest, it's rather moving away from technology and just getting them to work together and collaborate. So we give them, I don't know, a day, half a day to sort of go away, think of an idea, and we give them guidance in terms of like a name for the company, what are you presenting, who's your target market, what's the price, all of that sort of stuff. And it gives them an opportunity to think of things. And I think we give them some ideas sometimes. Like I know for assessment centres, we ask them to think of, like, for students to think of what tools would they want to make their life a little bit easier. But ultimately, it's just a good idea for them to collaborate as a group, but also come up with an idea, show their creative side, and then they present it back to us. And they can present it back however they want, whether they want to do a serious pitch and we're the dragons and we have to choose whether we buy in or not. But it's just a good exercise that we've done.
Is that with, I assume, is the kind of product or the idea that they're pitching linked to your business, Gabriella?
It doesn't have to be. Usually for the first induction ones, we don't. It's just something that they think is a good idea, something that they can be creative about.
I guess that's kind of, you can see more about the person then, can't you? If you're not constraining it to the intricacies of your business, it's just more about, how you appear. Sam, I know obviously you're on the cause in the capacity of being a youth employment expert. I don't know, do Manchester Young Lives employ young people? Do you take on like young apprentices or trainees? I imagine you probably do.
Yeah, because obviously being a young person's charity, obviously one of the key things is that we don't just support young people into employment and with education. We obviously do take on young apprenticeships. So we have them in our youth and play team. And if, for example, we have somebody that wants to do detached work, long term, we understand that, I suppose it's going back to one of the conversations you had earlier on, somebody might go and do a college course or a university course and believe that they've got, their level 3 in youth and play, and they can go straight out on the streets and deal with other young people and things. But what we try and do is obviously give them different periods of time within different aspects within the company. So for example, we have the play and youth team, so they obviously work with children from the age of 5 up to I think it's about 16. So they do a bit of period of time there. They can come and do some time with me on the employability program. And then gradually we build them onto the detached team, our youth engagement team. So they kind of get an idea of what it's like to work and building up those skills. And obviously in each department, they do have a mentor that is solely to work with them, so that can answer any questions that they may have, and that they can follow guidance from them. So, yeah.
So it's about that exposure to different areas of the organisation and just getting an overview of who's who. And
and I think for us as well, one of the things we've realised is that having a mentor or having somebody that is primarily there for them has a big difference as well. Because obviously if you've got a young person that is, potentially, like yourself, Daisy, has potential learning needs that either have been, he has an EHC plan for, or has never been assessed, but there are potentially, ideas that there could be a need there. It's kind of looking at that and how we can then support that moving forward. So for example, we've worked with a young person before, and we kind of noticed that through obviously some of the tasks that they have to do is paperwork, and obviously we kind of looked at the paperwork and thought, well, something's not, you know, something's not right here, but they're telling us that they've got, you know, GCSEs in English and things like that. However, that young person, when we actually looked into it a little bit more, did have dyslexia, and this was something that was never picked up in school, never picked up in college, and it was what we could then do to support that young person. If it was making sure that now from then on, all the paperwork that that young person received was on the appropriate coloured paper for them, because obviously they prefer different colour papers, and it was obviously then trying to find other ways to support that young person. Could we do it that instead of it was handwritten, could the documents then be done on a computer instead? So it's adapting to each individual need. So it's not just from a young person's perspective, it could be a staff member's perspective as well. Anybody, we've all got individual needs. It's just trying to meet individual needs. And once you've done that and you've established that, that young person then, or that employer, will obviously want to continue working and want to help, you know, move forward and achieve. And I think another thing is regular check-ins with that young person. Even though that person might have a mentor, is that person who's a mentor might be another youth worker, but it's for the manager then to obviously meet with that young person on a regular basis as well. You know, within the first week that they've started their employment, I would meet with them at the end of the day. I would meet with them then probably 2 days later, and I would then meet with them at the end of the week. And then I'd tend to meet with them on a weekly basis to kind of establish how things are going. Is there any problems? Are there any positives? Are there any things that they think we can change? So it's always getting their perspective on how things can be done and done differently as well.
Sam, just to ask, how did the evidence of that young person's dyslexia surface? Again, sorry, I might have just missed it when I was scribbling.
We tasked the young person with, when we do a kind of a detached session, at the end of it, we have to kind of write an overview report on what happened in that detached session. And when I started checking the paperwork afterwards, I just started to notice that it was just little, you know, spelling changes and the way the words were, and it was continuous. So it was not as though, you know, some people get there and there mixed up, you know, and it can be a simple thing, but it was something that really stood out. And then the more I looked at the paperwork and had conversations, it became more apparent. But then I do have previous knowledge of working with young people with dyslexia and the different things. So it was just to have a simple conversation and to see how they felt about it, and kind of said, look, you know, it's not an issue, it's not a problem, it's something that you have, we can deal with it and we can support you on this. And it's obviously not making it an issue or a problem, and it's something that can be easily solved.
It was just that having that space in the first place for it to come about, for you to be able to recognise it.
Yeah. Cool.
Kiz, have you got any thoughts on anything you've heard so far in the group?
I think that you all do like a lot of really good work, especially what Samantha was talking about, and how they support young people. I mean, I've been to Manchester University before. Are you guys based at the Powerhouse?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we've got quite a few centres, but I am based at the Powerhouse because
Yeah, I went there before I think I used just to get some advice on some things. So and I find it to be quite useful. I think I'm not really sure what to say. I think in terms of like supporting young people, in one of my jobs we had this a mentor. So we had this service where the employer was linked to this mentoring service, and it was related to like a career that the young person would want to get into, because not every young person wants to get into the kind of role they already are. Sometimes they want to get into a different role. If they're working like part-time, they have a specific industry they want to get into. So basically with this service, they got linked up to a professional who was working in that industry. For me, it was someone who worked in like the creative industry, and they got to talk to them for about a year, which was like an hour a month. And I think that really helped, because it kind of not only helped them during with like their future career, but it also helped them focus on the work that they're already doing, because then they won't have to worry about if this is relevant to the career I want to go into or not. But also, like, the mentor also helps with kind of employability related skills. So, for example, kind of adjusting to the role, because they kind of worked as part of the employer work along with the employer, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I might ask you to share that with the main room when we go back. Is it just that point about tapping into your wider interest and a mentor finding areas to link you in elsewhere? That's okay. Other spheres within that organisation. I know we're going to run out of time very quickly. Gabriella, is there anything you think you guys could? Sorry, Gabriella, I don't know where are you from again? Sorry, it's a tech company, isn't it? Oh, have we lost Gabriella? Oh no, you're back. Sorry,
I was like, I'm here.
You froze for a second.
Sorry.
Just asking. Yeah, sorry, I didn't know what tech. Yeah, where it is the tech company you work at is and who they are.
Yeah, so Hewlett Packard Enterprise. So we've got offices in Manchester. Most recently, I think over the past year, maybe 2 years now. And then I work with our graduate scheme, which has recently moved from our southern site in Bracknell to Manchester as well, which is good. But we definitely take on apprentices as well, which is, I think, really good.
And was that Dragon's Den idea, was that part of recruitment or part of induction? Sorry.
So we do it for both, to be honest. So we do it as an icebreaker, but we also do it sometimes as part of assessment centre group activities as well. And I think it's important, particularly for some of the roles that we offer in terms of sales as well, because it's good to get them to sell their product back to us.
Sure. Is there anything from today that you might want to kind of incorporate into, I don't know if you're in a position to sort of look at tweaks that can be made to existing practices or not, Gabriella? Anything that's come up that you think, oh, that's probably something we could take on board, or even if it's just a mindset, even if it's not a practical tip, just something that's been talked about in terms of understanding of young people.
Yeah, so we have a handbook that we share with our graduates, but I think we're definitely going to add more content that you mentioned, Sam, for that, and definitely give it to our apprentices as well, and probably cover more things in detail, particularly like around salary and how that stuff works, which I do think they get told on day one, but sometimes they just need it written down and repeated to them as well, I think would help. And just one place that they can go to first rather than being afraid to ask.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was a recent graduate, I was still financially illiterate and didn't understand what that's not just something that's unique to young people who are working at level 2, level 3. That's young people in general, isn't it?
100%.
I think so.
Can I just add? I put on a chat anyway, but just going back to some ideas as well on learning disabilities. That DAB University is offering a free course on ADHD, Asperger's, and autism, and it's free. It's 12 hours. You can do it in a day each unit. But I think it's very important to employers to kind of join in and understand the learning disability. So that's me done, my contribution.
No, that's great. I'll make sure. I'm never sure whether the chat shares back to the main room now, actually, after the breakout room. So I'll make sure I'll copy and paste that and make sure it's shared in the main room as well, Daisy. But that's really useful. And I think it's something that, again, unless you work with young people who are, or staff members in general who are autistic, you don't have that understanding, do you? But it never hurts to build it up, even if you don't have staff who are on the spectrum, because you never know when you might want to employ someone, who's neurologically diverse. So I don't think it ever hurts to educate yourself on that front.
And just quickly, I think the other thing to consider is with young people is they might want to do that career, but with no lack of experience in the first opportunity, once they get into it for a couple of weeks, it might not be what they want to do either. And that's something that we tend to not think about as well.
No one's lost in the ether somewhere, are they? We've got to run back. Thanks for that, Liz. Well, quickly, we'd sort of little bit time, but we'll have a sort of bit of feedback. Maybe one thing that stood out from each group. I'll ask the hidden talent team to share their views. There was some useful stuff in my group that I can share in the chat generally. I don't know if it's already gone through. It's that point. Can people see Daisy Silver's point in the chat there about Derby University? Is that popping up in people's chat? If people can give me a nod or a thumbs up, if that's showing. No, because I don't know if the chat's unique to my breakout room, so I'll share that point from Daisy. But Helen, do you want to share something that really stood out from your breakout room, either about good practice or some they'll desire to change things based on what's been said today?
Yeah, so it's something that Jill at Great Places Housing is going to be doing. They are going to be having some Kickstart placements, and they're going to have like an additional layer of probably Jill there to ask any questions to that isn't the person's line manager. So they've not got that fear of being judged by asking a question that may be deemed silly when that's not actually their line manager who's managing their progress in their work, etc. So it's a bit like an extra support there, if you like. I think that sounds really great.
Brilliant, thanks, Helen. Vicky, was there anything from your group that stood out as good practice?
Yeah, so Dio discussed having inductions being like more of a 90-day process, where you do like the main induction in the week and then you check in at the end of the week and then you check in at 30 days and 60 days and 90 days. It's not just like a very short period of time, but over a longer period of checking in. We also discussed having something to summarize what we discussed today and like the knowledge gap. But like, because we discussed quite a few things are going to change, like having like the to-do list instead of like just looking at the policy or the employee handbook, or like having a new starter to talk to alongside like your manager. So things like that.
Yeah, and we can see some of those tips when we send stuff out after the event later this week, either tomorrow or Friday. But that point you made about it being a long-term process, that links back to what we're talking about in our room. And Kizo, I don't know if you wanted to share your experience rather than me talk from our group about the fact you've had an induction that opened you up to other areas of an organisation.
Yeah, so as part of the induction, we had an opportunity to get a mentor, which is run by an organisation that works with the employer, and I think it was especially useful because they were not only supported us with like the kind of getting into adjusting to like the work, but also into like our chosen career. So not everyone wants to kind of get into the role they're currently in. They might want to change their mind. They might have like a plan to do. They might have like a more desired role, and with the mentor, they worked in that field already, and they were able to give us proper advice. So it was like an hour a month for 12 months, and it really helped kind of build confidence and develop our kind of future aspirations.
Yeah, thanks, because it's about a balancing act, isn't it? You've applied for that role, and that's the role you're there to do, but you shouldn't just be straitjacketed into that one thing. It's people need to develop, don't they, and experience other elements and other facets of that organisation. I will say, but I was scribbling furiously in my group, so I can still share the other points that Daisy and Gabriella made in my group when we send out stuff after the event. So that good practice will still be shared. Gavin, do you want to feedback on behalf of your group?
Very quickly, 2 points. So Beth from Hewlett Packard spoke about having the new starters, the young people who are new starters, all start at the same time, so nationally, so they have that peer support straight from the start. And she said as well that she's still in touch with her buddy. So as well as having the new starters, everyone has a buddy who is from the previous year's intake. And four years on, she's still in touch with her buddy. And it was almost a working example of what Kiza had said earlier about having someone to ask about those questions around the protocols of the workplace. And then Zoe from Sick Festival was talking about very small team, and this is what they want to develop. Going to have a Kickstart opportunity, and just looking at the recruitment and induction process and trying to make it as accessible as possible, and looking at life experience for those roles rather than previous work experience. And then so Janet and Tina, the talent coach, were saying that's great, looking at that life experience and having that flexibility. So, you know, I said about the toolkit, and we'll put Zoe in touch with that. So it was really good.
Thanks, Gavin. Yeah, that's something we've got tips on in our existing employer toolkit around how to prize out people's values rather than looking at experience and as the be all and end all. I think we do have a minute or two. So you just to I've not, have I missed a group out here? Have I? I think we've got around everyone. So just to touch on Gabriella in my group, they run a a Dragon's Den type activity where young people get to pitch an idea or a product. It isn't necessarily anything linked to Hewlett-Packard, who she works for. It's something of their choosing, and young people can do that in groups, and that's used as both a recruitment and an induction tool. So that's useful. And then I've just shared in the chat there from Daisy, who works for Rochdale Council, who's just mentioned some learning around ADHD, Asperger's and autism, free course being offered by Derby University. And I've said to Daisy that she can link in with Eva, who's one of our talent coaches who isn't on the call today, who has a lot of experience working with young people who have additional learning needs. And if anyone else would like that, just drop your name in the chat. Any sort of employability support around people with learning disability, Eva is strong on that, even though she can't join us today. Yeah, we'll try and see all of the good practice from today and some of the pointers that the talent coaches have made in the handout will come around after the event. I'll just bring up the PowerPoint again, 1 second. I'll just skip through these. Yeah, so we will send out after today's event, we are sort of on time, surprisingly, a copy of the toolkit. And also, if you do want to get involved with our young people in the programme, the volunteers, the youth panel, Kizza is one of our youth panel, you can get in touch with me and they can help review some of your processes, be they induction, be they recruitment. Yeah, our young people can offer that service. So my details are there if you want to jot those down. Yeah, it's sort of something we offer for free, and that can be looking at virtual processes as well. We are producing another guide at the minute on virtual inductions and toolkits. I don't know if Gab mentioned it earlier, but that'll sort of be, we'll have that published in sort of a month's time or so. We've just been doing the groundwork and research into some best practice around that. And just to go back a slide, some of you may already be members of the Good Employment Charter. It's a GM-wide initiative. There are various tiers of membership, so you can just be a supporter when you can make a basic pledge to uphold 7 characteristics of good employment. Sort of the living wage is one of those things. Fair recruitment is one of those characteristics. I don't remember all 7. But you can then, so it's a tiered scale, so you can then become a member or an advocate thereafter. And it's a bit of a groundswell movement, really, that opens up to, they offer a load of workshops, similar to how we've done today, maybe not quite as niche today, looking at young people, but they do offer sort of every fortnight or so, they seem to have regular good practice workshops on good employment. So well worth checking out. I'll drop the link in the chat to their kind of homepage and get involved page before we finish today. Talent coaches, I don't know if you just want to drop your details into the chat as well before we finish. I'll send them round via email as well, but just in case there's any relationships that people want to build on from today. And if it's a case of just, a talent coach has said something that's piqued your interest, or you just want a bit more advice around employability support, or indeed you might want to find out if they've got capacity to help you with anything. I know some of you are talking about working on Kickstart, and it might be you want to look at some help with wraparound support for Kickstart. Thank you all for joining us today. As I said, it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. I hope it's opened up some sort of new thoughts around support that young people might need. It sounds like people are doing a lot of good things already, but I think empathy is the main thing I would take away from today, just trying to understand how someone who might have had a different background or a different educational experience to yourself might be thinking when they first enter the workplace, and just trying to walk a mile in someone else's shoes, perhaps. Gavin, were you wanting to chip in before we?
I was, yeah. Sorry. Well spotted, Ben. Yeah, it was just around the wraparound support. So, with around Kickstart, we spoke earlier about the growth company and GMCBO having a partnership to be a gateway organisations for voluntary and community sector organisations within Greater Manchester. And as part of Kickstart, there is wraparound support for those new starters. And I'm speaking to the growth company around having our delivery partners that are on hidden talent as potential providers to have that wraparound support. And you know, they will get paid for that, but I think we've got good knowledge within the delivery partners about, and today they spoke so well about the type of support that they can offer employees around that additional support if needed, just being the go-between and able to iron out any problems. So if any of the organisations today are looking for wraparound support for their Kickstart new starters, then they can get in touch with GMCBO as well.
Thanks, Gav. Yeah, and many thanks rather to our talent coaches and Sam for joining the call today. I know people having to skedaddle because it's after midday, so we will wrap up. But yeah, thanks everyone for 2 hours out of your day. And yeah, just look for the follow-up email for myself with the resources. Enjoy the rest of your days, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.